What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast presented by the Surf and Sales Summit, November 15th to 19th and November 20th to 24th, I believe are the dates. Richard Harris, how are you?
I'm good, man. It's like 2 days in a row I get to talk to you. So I feel special and lucky.
Yeah. Are you excited to go back to Costa Rica in November?
Dude, you have no idea. You have no idea. In fact, I have to go get my knee thing taken care of, right? And if I tell me that I have to have any kind of procedure, I'm holding it off until after Surf and Sales.
Yes, that sounds familiar. That's what I did with my shoulder. This is the stage of life that we're in now, where we put off important medical procedures that would help us feel better in order to power through injuries so we can continue to go to Surf and Sales. Check it out, surfandsales.com. I'm Scott Leese. That's Richard Harris. We are here talking today to a keynote speaker, a sales coach and trainer from San Clemente, California, which is like the best surf place in California, basically. I'm super jealous.
He's even dressed like a surfer.
It's pretty great.
He should be at Surf and Sales. He might be at Surf and Sales already. He's the founder and CEO of Sell As You Are, Chris Caldwell. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's good to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Tell us a little bit about Sell As You Are and what you're up to. I know you're running your own business, you're a coach and a trainer, but that can mean many things to many different people. So give us a quick download.
It can mean many things to many different people. It can be pretty triggering to some people when they hear it.
True, actually.
Based on some past experience. I was speaking to a prospect yesterday who said the last sales consultant he hired, they ended up in court suing each other. So, that can happen. Some people have some pretty traumatic experiences.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, what did you do? Now I've changed the subject. I'm suddenly no longer letting Chris introduce himself. Hold on. Let me pause. Okay. Tell everybody what you do, what you specialize in, and then I already have a question.
Okay. Gotcha. So I think the question was tell a bit about Sell As You Are. I'll tell the SparkNotes version. I actually started my career as a school teacher, and I did that for about a decade. And I taught, I led retreats, I coached sports teams, everything else. I transitioned out of education right into sales, which everyone always told me I should do my whole life. Wound up at Sandler Training. So worked for Sandler, was a sales trainer and sales coach there. Loved it, learned a lot about myself, about sales coaching and training, about people. Left that to run my own team in the corporate world in insurance and finance. I wanted to see if I could take my skills to the most boring industry possible. And I did. But in all seriousness, I really loved it there. Loved the people I worked with. And about 3.5 years ago, I went off on my own from the things I had really tailored while in my corporate role. The system I created, the approach I was taking to coaching and training my own employees, and what I carried over from, my time as a sales trainer, and started Sell As You Are. And, at Sell As You Are, we spend a lot of focus on the inner work, on the sales person, as much as we do the sales person. And so we really try to bring an integrated and holistic approach to sales training and coaching that really allows people to step into their power and do it in a thoughtful and intentional way.
This is modern sales training, Richard. I'm going to train.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is what I tried to teach you to do, Scott. I tried to teach you to do this when we were
wasn't ready
together.
That was 20 years ago. I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I'm more ready now. Well, I want to go back to this story where Chris is talking to this prospect, and the prospect tell him the last consultant he worked with, they both ended up suing each other. So I want to know, what did you do with this particular prospect? Because I'm thinking to myself, I would have said, you know what? I don't think this is a good fit.
I don't want to deal with this guy or woman. Yeah.
No. I don't want to deal with this person. So I want to know what Chris did, because he probably had a better response than we would have.
Well, I've built up pretty good rapport with this prospect in our meetings. And I mean, honestly, the first thing out of my mouth was, it's been months since I have been sued by a client. And he took that for the joke it was. But no, I mean, honestly, I just asked him, like, man, like you the last person you worked with that was in my position, you were in court with. Can you explain to me why the hell you're talking to another one?
Right.
Because I would want to stay 10 feet away from them and avoid them at all costs. And he, went into more detail about what had happened, about the misalignment they had. Sounds like the person that they hired was really out of integrity, which happens. And,
Right.
I asked him, I'm like, what did you learn from that? Like, what do we need to make sure that we're openly and honestly talking about to ensure that a proper amount of trust is built and that you feel comfortable with me, to continue this conversation? And so it actually opened up, it actually opened up some real vulnerability and some real authenticity, in like a passing snide comment he had initially made. So humor usually first step to enlightenment is lightening up. So humor usually opens the door for that in most conversations.
I love that. I love that. I don't know that I would have been witty enough on the fly to think of that. I would have just got cold feet and gotten.
I don't know. I was sitting here listening, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what Scott Leese would do.
Maybe I could just do it on the fly. Maybe I could do it on the fly. I can't think of it right now.
It has
to come out naturally.
Yeah. I did stand up and I did improv comedy for 6 years. And that helps so much in conversation. I never thought something like improv comedy would help so much in like something like sales.
So here's my next question, and then I'll let Richard participate in this conversation since it's a co-hosted podcast.
Scott is out of 430 episodes. This is the first time Scott's been on fire.
First time ever. Wait, I want to know, and I this is going to sound funny, and I actually mean it very seriously.
Okay.
I want to know, did you learn more about sales from being a stand-up comedian, improv comedian, or from Sandler sales?
I learn more about, I think it's
Don't
both.
get him sued, Scott.
I think it's both.
You probably have to sign some document.
No, I'll abstain from comment on that one. But I learned from doing stand-up and improv, I learned more about people and more about myself from that, and how I relate to people, how I connect with people, and how I make people feel comfortable. That sort of like the inner work, the relationship, the relational aspect of sales that is you can't never remove from sales. When I worked at Sandler, I learned the importance of process orientation and systemization of an approach to being a professional salesperson. Because when I started at Sandler, I just, had convinced myself that I can be really good at sales because I like to talk. And, I found out very quickly that that's not the best way to approach sales or life. And so I would say both. I think they're both really important. I think being able to combine that skill at relating to people, the feminine energies of compassion and connection and patience and humor and lightheartedness with those like masculine energies of systemization and structure and action taking and courage are really, really important and very necessary to tap into your fullest potential in sales and in relationships.
How do you teach that? How do you teach that relational piece, right? And I know it's not like a sound bite, right? Like
Sure.
We all do this, right? We all teach people how to build rapport and connect and do those things. From the comedy side, from the improv side, what were you taught? What did you learn about making that human connection? And I'll even push it in a certain direction of that instantaneous piece. Because in comedy, there's got to be a connection pretty quick, right? Unless you are like a really famous comedian. There's got to be a really instant. What did you learn? How do you teach that to someone? Or what do you teach someone?
That's a really great question. I was fortunate enough to do improv comedy at a Jesuit university. And the Jesuits focus a lot on contemplation, reflection, going on retreat. And so I was putting myself out there in a way that scared the hell out of me and actually created quite a bit of anxiety in me. And then I was also given the opportunity to retreat and to think about it. I spent actually a lot of time on retreat thinking about comedy because it created such a wobble inside of me and so much insecurity inside of me. And our approach at Sell As You Are, my approach personally to any of teaching someone how to connect with other people is always teaching someone how to connect with themselves first. So we take people through certain exercises and trainings to help shine a light on how are you showing up? Why are you showing up this way? What stories or frames do you have around sales or prospecting or money or asking for the order or asking difficult questions or interrupting people or whatever it is, right? That could cause real internal wobble for a sales professional. Taking them through the act of learning about themselves and then prompting them to think about, okay, how do we see that reflected in our prospects? How do we see that reflected in a CEO? Here you are, an enterprise sales account executive who feels insecure and like an imposter in this area. Like if you were talking to this CEO, how do you think he or she might be feeling the same way? Like if they feel that way, how do you think they could try to project that BS onto you? And so the more we understand ourselves, the more we can immediately flip it and begin to understand other people. But those who don't know themselves can't truly know others. They may know surface level, like tactics or techniques on, as the look at the picture of the family, or I see, the Jim Kelly jersey. And so we can talk about how Scott just like loves to suffer and be miserable because he's a Bills fan, right?
So true.
Yes.
It's like, only Bills fans like choose to be miserable and wear it as a badge of honor, right? So like we can have those those topical things and connect in that way. But like the more I know Chris, the more I can truly understand Scott, the more I can truly understand Richard.
So I want to make sure I understand, what sports team then are you feeling so self-chooserably miserable about so that you can connect to Scott? What is your what is your team of suffering?
I'm not as miserable as I used to be, but I'm a diehard Baltimore Orioles fan. And so I'm 37.
I think that counts.
Yeah.
That does. It's been long enough.
Genuinely my entire life outside of 96 and 97 and like 2012 to 2014, they've been awful. Now they're going to be insanely good for like a decade, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I can definitely connect.
That's still not nearly as miserable as a Buffalo Bills fan, though. I must say.
No one is. And there's not many people as miserable as a Western New Yorker.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So what is the resistance, right? Like, I mean, I think we all run into this, right? There's always, I call him Grumpy Gus, who sits in the back of the room, right? Who doesn't even want to learn some basics, some simple things. You're asking them to go deep inside, right? How do you, for those who are leaders and maybe even the people who need to self-reflect, how do you encourage that person to kind of let go of their resistance?
Yeah. I think the word you used is the perfect word, which is encourage. I really try to, because you're right. I'll be training a team of 10, maybe in manufacturing, and I will absolutely have Grumpy Gus. And if I have 10, I probably have more than one Grumpy Gus. I'll also have the person at the edge of their seat who's just eating up everything I say and will be like, man, can I be your best friend? You're right. It's just like, and so it's really just meeting people where they are and recognizing that like there might be a Grumpy Gus who really is struggling to relate to the conscious awareness I'm trying to drive and is going to be resistant to this. So how do I speak to him or her in a way that doesn't threaten that insecurity, instead make space for it, acknowledges it, and recognizes that if we're doing a 2-day boot camp or an 8-week training program, there are some things I'm going to say they're really going to land with you. And there are some things I'm going to say that don't. And the ones that don't, you can set to the side, and that's fine. And let's focus on what do you really want to get out of this. So I can then focus their attention there and then get them to take action toward that. And I think that over time, as you meet people where they are, you realize that your coaching, they begin to realize that your relationship with them truly is about them and not about yourself. And they begin to build that trust up, and they begin to be more willing to hear you out, or to maybe receive your encouragement with more enthusiasm.
I think it's tricky to figure out what to kind of put to the side when you're getting advice. You know, you said take the stuff that resonates and put to the side the stuff that doesn't. I think that's a skill set of sorts, and is quite difficult for people to do. So when you're coming up in your career and you're getting all this advice from Sandler and places like that in particular, what stuff do you now look at and say, oh, I put that aside, I don't believe in that, I don't apply that, I do something different with what I'm doing right now?
Yeah. I think that now I'm pretty, I have fine-tuned my ability, a skill of discernment much more sharply than earlier in my career. And I think discernment is a wildly underrated skill, like you mentioned, Scott. And so now I can usually tap in pretty quickly to, this feels true to me. There's a knowing, or I like to say like a remembering here. Like when things really land with me, it doesn't, like an aha moment, it doesn't feel like I just learned something. It feels like I just remembered something. And so like in like a deeper way. And so when that hits me, now I can tap into that pretty quick. Early on, what I would typically do is I would typically do what I was told, and then I would see how it felt, but I would do it, and I would take action toward it, and I would really sit back and see how it went. Did I get the result I wanted? How did I feel when I did it? Did I feel out of alignment, or did I just feel scared? And what's the difference between those two things? So I typically ask my clients, like, I'm encouraging you to do the things that work for me and that work for my other clients. I'm always changing and adjusting and learning along the way. And I ask you, like, if you don't want to do what I'm telling you to do, let's talk about why. And let's come to some type of co-creation of what you can take action on. And then I ask you to take action on genuinely. And then let's talk about how it went. But unless you're willing to take action on it or willing to try it, it's really difficult for me to engage in conversation about why it will or won't work. So I'm very much like I get the advice. Okay, that makes sense to me. I'm not sure exactly how it will work. Let me try it. And then let me see how it goes.
Then check the result. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my mentor when I first got to Sandler. He was, I think, David Sandler's 6th employee. And so he had been in it for literally decades. And he really drilled that into me. Like, I'm not going to tell you to do anything that will hurt you. And I've recognized you are not me. So I'll tell you exactly how I would do it and why. And then let's talk about how you think you should do it. And then go do it. And then let's come back and talk about how it went. And that practice, just like any practice, that practice got me more tuned in to what's real for me and what's resonant for me. And now I can usually discern much more quickly now, what's right for me.
I think I made a joke earlier about this is like modern selling, modern sales leadership, whatever. But it is true, because 20 years ago when I was getting started, nobody talked about the inner work or any of this kind of stuff that you're talking about. So what do you think has brought about the openness and the receptiveness in the market to this newer style of leadership that you're talking about? It's having a moment.
Yeah. Well, it's having its moment. I'm not sure the moment's going to go away anytime soon. And
tell us why. What is going on that has set the stage for this to become the new norm?
Pain. I think people are in pain. And I think there's a level of disconnection that people have never, the human race, at least, you know, in modern history, have never experienced. And then you throw a global pandemic on top of that, and you force people into even more disconnection. And they're not just disconnected from other people, but they're disconnected from themselves. Like never before could a person have a really shitty day and then find themselves doom scrolling about what everyone else is doing and accomplishing for 90 minutes while laying in bed without even realizing it. The ease for people to disconnect from their own reality and to not feel their pain has never been this accessible. And as a father of 3 young children, it scares the hell out of me. And I can see it in my own children, even just giving them like 45 minutes on an iPad on a Saturday morning for the next 2 or 3 hours. They're a different child after they disconnect from it. And so when you have at your fingertips the ability to tune out of your own life and to tune into someone else's, it creates a level of disconnection that humans we haven't caught up to it, and we haven't figured out how to deal with it. Yeah. And now you take that human and then you put them into a career of rejection and a career of judgment and a career of criticism and condemnation, like sales can be. And what we begin to see is we begin to see people realizing like there is something wrong here, because not only, you know, in many of the negative consequences technology creates, but what technology also creates is technology also creates conversations like these. And so people begin to see like, wait, hold on a second. I'm not the only one that's feeling anxiety about this. I'm not the only one that's feeling overwhelmed. I'm not the only one that's feeling like a huge imposter here. And they begin to realize that like, wait, I'm not alone. This is like other people are dealing with this shit too. Like, how are they dealing with it? And it becomes a conversation. And so I think that, you know, it's almost like 2 competing forces in society right now, like the technology disconnecting people from themselves and from others, and then a little bit of a counter revolution, which the people saying like, hold on a second, like I've felt this way for way too long. I'm tired of feeling this way. There's got to be something out there that can help me.
Dude, that might be the deepest thing we've ever heard, Scott. I don't know where to go from there. I feel like it's like,
well, I was thinking to myself, I just read something yesterday, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it's somebody relatively well known in the tech space, and they essentially said imposter syndrome is a myth or bullshit. The only people who have imposter syndrome are people who actually are imposters.
Yeah, that sounds like something Alex Hormozy would say and have said.
I don't know that it was him. I don't want to misquote.
Well, to be fair to Alex, I have heard him say literally that phrase.
Well, there you go. Maybe it wasn't him. So you don't buy into that obviously at all. You don't prescribe to that.
Well, I think it is far too reductionist, right? Like imposter, there's not some objective definition. Imposter is a feeling. Imposter is not something that you can measure, right? Like, and so like imposter syndrome is a syndrome in which someone is feeling something over and over again, because you might look at my CV and you might say, Chris is an imposter. Someone else might look at my CV and say like, holy shit, Chris has some like crazy, unique professional experiences that make him even more prepared for this. So it doesn't matter objectively what other people would analyze in their mind. The imposter syndrome lives within my heart and within the stories I tell myself. So yeah, if I feel like an imposter, then that's where it comes from. And it's just a manifestation of our not enoughness, right? Our feelings of not being enough. You know, and wherever those come from is our own personal journey and how they manifest. But I think it might be, I think maybe my honest opinion on a statement like that is it's a bit too trite and a bit too focused on accomplishment and results as opposed to experience.
I'm sure it was designed to maximize clicks.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, I think statements like that are very catalyzing, and they're very helpful because it gets people talking. And so people that have the courage to say those things authentically are a great help to society and to raising our consciousness. People who say it for clicks are people who say it for clicks, but gets the conversation started nonetheless, I guess.
So I want to completely shift, because we've gone down a deep,
Okay.
a wonderful hole.
Great.
Right.
Prepared to shift away.
Of mental health. I want to ask a question, because Scott and I've said it, and I've run education teams. Why are teachers so good at sales? Because if I could ever, I will gladly take a teacher with no sales experience long before I take someone with some sales experience, short of me selling Boeing engines to Delta Airlines, right? Like, there's a completely different scenario. But what is it that y'all have?
Well, I think there are things that are helpful and things that are harmful. Teachers, when it comes to sales, let's start with the things that would hold a teacher back. And I can speak from experience on that. Really, I'm just talking about a past version of me. And that's the teachers were very altruistic. And that where that can hurt is that they genuinely aren't money motivated. I remember once being in a faculty meeting in which they were rolling out an entirely new 403B plan. And 3 of the teachers got up early and left because it was past 4 o'clock. And it's like,
they got up and left because they actually don't have any money to invest in.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's just like, it was a reminder of, like, I mean, this guy's entire retirement being flipped upside down. And he's just like, do I have to stay or can I go home? Right. Because it's just not what they think about. They just don't think about money. So, and they likely have a lot of very strong limiting beliefs around money and around their own worth. So that holds them back. But that altruism really shows up because teachers that I worked with genuinely cared. Like there was a genuineness in their caring for the person that they were talking to. And more importantly, and one of the things that I think really helped me when I got into the training space is I really cared about the person actually understanding what I was training them on and actually being able to do what I was training them on. There is a power of application that the teacher focuses on, in that, like, when I'm teaching my AP classes, it's not about how well am I teaching the material. It's, do they get it? And what are they going to get on the AP test? Like, are they actually transferring the knowledge into some type of experience? And so when you show up with that in sales and you're talking to a prospect and you really care, not just about the prospect buying what you're selling, but using it and actually getting an impact from it and using it the right way and on the right timeline, that's an energetic feeling that the prospect can feel from you that they might not be able to define, but there's such an authenticity and genuine nature to that you can't, it's very difficult to replicate that. You can practice curiosity, you can practice caring, you can practice giving, you can practice all those things. It's a hell of a lot easier if you hire someone who's already been practicing it for years on dozens or hundreds of young people. It's already just like, it's a habit ingrained in them. And it likely came from an even earlier age, which is why they wanted to teach in the first place.
Why did you leave teaching? Like, what was your path there?
Well, there are practical reasons. When we got pregnant with our second child, I was going to be losing almost $1,000 a month teaching. 2 daycare bills cost almost $1,000 more than I would be taking home. Yes.
As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about, because I've done that math before in my life.
Yeah. And it was heartbreaking because I realized that I could show up and kill myself and lose money taking care of other people's children while I paid for other people to take care of them. And so I knew I did not want to be a stay-at-home dad. That just was not, that's not how I'm wired. Not have nothing against it. And one of my best friends is a stay-at-home dad, like have no problem with that. The reality was, my wife was making far more than I was making, twice what I was making, if not more. And so it was either I switch careers or I stay home. And so people have been telling me my whole life I should go into sales. And so that's what I did. And so, yeah.
Go ahead. What was your first sale? Do you remember your first sale?
I do. So my first, so I did door-to-door sales. So I did
Cutco
that. I did that. No, not Cutco knives. I started 2 LLCs. Actually, probably the most interesting is I figured out the algorithm of the Score It penny auction website.
What?
And so I created usernames because you can only have one username per person. So I created usernames for myself, my entire family, all my friends, because you could only win like 12 things a month. So I think I had 14 or 15 different usernames. And I figured out like the algorithm and the patterns. And so I just had like a room full of iPads and Garmin's and watches, smart watches and all that stuff. And I create Caldwell electronics and I would just sell it all on eBay. But yeah, it was like Christmas morning. My dad, both my brothers got an iPad. And this was when the iPad first came out. And they're like,
Right.
how did you do that? And I told them and they didn't believe me. I looked at my watch. I'm like, actually, their iPad goes for sale at 9:45 Eastern every morning. Watch this. And I literally pulled up my computer and won another iPad right in front of them in like 90 seconds. And their mind was blown.
That's
But
amazing.
that's probably the most like interesting, like selling and
That's a great
entrepreneurial
story
market.
for the first.
I've
for the
never
first
heard
sale
that
you
a
know,
story
right?
like that. Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
all.
They
Love
shut
it.
me
That's
down.
awesome.
They shut me down. They they
I
called
bet.
on
They
me.
figured they tracked your IP addresses. They,
Yeah. Well, I had everything mailed to the same
same address. There you go. Yeah.
UPS location. So
Right.
yeah. So they called on to me.
Well, we appreciate you spending some time with us, Chris, getting to know you a little bit, telling us about what you're up to and all that kind of stuff. How can we be helpful to you?
Well, I'm curious from your guys' experience. Like I'd be curious to get your perspective on something. What do you think is the biggest shift that sales organizations need to be making over the next few years in order to keep up with the changing landscape within sales?
Oh gosh, that is an existential crisis question.
Dude, it's like this guy went to a Jesuit university where they can sit around and contemplate shit all the time.
Ladies and gentlemen listening, if you want your child to be very well educated, send them to
Yeah.
Xavier University
Yeah.
because they work well. No, it is actually an existential crisis, I think, because I've talked about this a lot and I get hammered for it a lot, but it's an indisputable fact right now that cold calling people on the phone doesn't work as good as it used to.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with cold emailing people. It does not work as good as it used to. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means it doesn't work as good as it used to. And it is declining. And it is impossible for me to see a world where those two things return to form or improve, because you have younger people coming up right now who did not grow up using those modalities to communicate. My kids who are teenagers do not talk on the telephone. They don't email. They find it annoying and makes no sense. So I just think to myself, 5-10 years from now, do you think you're going to be able to cold call them to get business, cold email them? That's not going to happen. Something is going to replace that. And what replaces that is the human touch. Again, we moved away from the human aspect of selling into automating everything, making 500 calls at a time because one wasn't good enough, and sending 5,000 emails because one wasn't good enough. And we had to satisfy our 10x growth metrics to keep the VCs fat and happy. So we ruined it. That's human nature. We find something that's nice, we exploit the shit out of it, and then we discard it, right? That's what we've done. So now you have AI coming. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's never going to take our jobs. Da, da, da. Yeah, it is.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's going to start with the low level jobs. It's going to start with some service professions like accounting. I just had this conversation with my 77-year-old father, and he was like, accounting jobs are going to disappear and AI is just going to take them over. Right. So the only way through to me is a return to humanity. And part of that humanity is your network. And you have to be extremely well networked and have trust built in to this network, because that's how opportunities are going to get opened. If I want to do a deal with Chris and I don't know Chris, I'm going to have to talk to Richard, who knows Chris, and be like, Richard, can you, help me get an intro over here? That's how I think in the next 5 to 10 years, that those are the companies that are going to make it. They'll be reducing headcount costs, changing mechanisms of how they go about trying to prospect. And I think that is an existential crisis headed towards our industry that most people do not want to face.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they don't want to face it because it is not in their best interest in the short term to admit to its existence? Or do you think that there is a fear that they won't be able to make the adjustments they need to make, or maybe both?
Both, for sure. Both.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Like, it is actually not in any of the three of our best interests for what I just said to come true based on what we do for a living.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm putting this out there because I'm going to benefit somehow because I do something different. No, this like fucks me as well.
Yeah.
Right. So what do we have to do? We're going to have to learn something different. A lot of people like Richard and I, well, we're in 3 generations here, upper 30s, upper 40s, mid 50s. Right.
Mm-hmm.
How much longer do people want to reinvent themselves and do something new and figure something new out? Right. Not that much longer if you've been successful. It's like, oh my God, I got to do all this over. So now you're scaring people because their livelihood is at stake. Yeah. Think about all the people who run cold call SDR for hire agencies and shops.
Yeah.
You're talking about these people's entire business potentially disappearing, right? Their ability to provide, feed their family. If they have $1 million businesses, they got used to a particular lifestyle, all of that shit is at risk now. So of course they want to yell at me and tell me that I'm wrong and this is never going to come true. So they're scared. I get it. You don't want to face it and they don't want to change. Go ahead, Richard.
Chris, as you look at your business, right? Because we all swim in the same pond.
Sure.
Are you trying to navigate your way into how am I going to evolve, or are you trying to figure out your exit strategy?
Much more the former than the latter. Yeah, I'm
Stop right there. Scott, are you trying to figure out how to evolve or figure out your exit strategy?
I'm always thinking about exit strategy.
Yeah, I'm 55. I guarantee you it's exit strategy, right? Like if I can go another 5 to 10 years, great, but I'm doing stuff on the side so that if I can't, right? If it becomes so different and I'm just become that cranky old man who doesn't want to change, then that's it. But it's a real challenge, right? Like, and so I think what's happening too is that I think there's a lot of people who are hitting their 40s and 50s and the VCs who are like, fuck, now what am I going to do? I better go get mine while I still can. And I think that's going to make it worse, right? Like, you see all these places of corruption in government and education. And I'm talking about here in the States, not anywhere. And sadly, so often it's people who haven't been able to benefit and they finally get into a position of where they can do some things for themselves. And then they do it in a very unhealthy and not so moral way. And I think that's exactly what's happening at a broader scale right now.
Yeah.
And I think people are now, I don't know if everybody's out there trying to like steal and cheat and lie, but I think the driver behind it is the same. The driver of selfishness is there because there are a lot of people doing that. And what'll be the most interesting thing, and we've been hearing it for decades, it will be very interesting though around the job market around, well, what happens when these boomers really do go?
Yeah.
In 5 years and the boomers are really out of the job force because there's not enough people to replace them. But then there's AI where's that balance, right? And I think that's the, I don't care what career you're in, but it'll be interesting. So, and I think some people think we're going to legislate our way from preventing AI from taking over, which, like,
because that's historically worked really well.
Yeah, I was
Really
about to
well,
say, well,
really,
that's always
yeah.
been a foolproof plan.
So I think
because
salespeople,
all the legislators are hip to the groove.
Oh yeah,
right,
Very
exactly.
young, and they're
yeah.
There's going to be a sales union.
They make Richard look young.
yeah. I was about to say, you think you guys are getting old? Like, go spend a day in Congress.
Yeah, I could say I could spend 30 years in Congress if I wanted. It'd be fine.
Yeah, you'd be the youngest guy there.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you once again spending time with us, Chris. This has been a lot of fun, man. Where can people get a hold of you and learn more about what you're up to?
Sure. I mean, I think anyone listening to this who's interested, like, I really want to hear from them. So connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a DM. And I'd love to talk, learn from them, see what their experience is, what's working for them, what's not. Because like I mentioned, you guys, like, I'm looking to evolve. I'm looking to learn as much as I can. And, so if you hear this and you want to get at me, it's just Chris Caldwell on LinkedIn. Find me, shoot me a DM. I'd love to chat. And of course, website selleasyouare.com. They can find out about the business and everything there.
Right on. Thanks everybody for listening
Chris.
to another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. Sell as you are, Chris Caldwell. See you next time.